Hi everyone. We are hanging out at our house today. Madeline and Ethan and I are here this afternoon, and today we're going to be telling you about our dogs that we have. So, if you probably haven't already guessed it, we have a lot of dogs, just like we have a lot of other animals. And in fact, we actually have 7 dogs, but we live out here in the country, and they have lots of room to run and to roam. And so we're going to be telling you a little bit about them and what kind of dogs they are, and breeds if we know them, and what we do to take care of them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the dogs first, and then Madeline and Ethan will join in as they tell us about the dogs that they picked out that they wanted to talk about. And we're going to actually start with the oldest dogs, and then we'll work our way down. So we have Buddy. Hi, Buddy. Buddy's an old guy. He's at least 15 years old, and we got Buddy from the Clinton Animal Shelter. One thing that you'll find out as we go through this is that almost all of our animals, all of our dogs, came from the shelter, or they were abandoned, and we took them in. So this video is going to be a pretty big plug for adopting animals and giving them a home. Buddy was actually an owner surrender at the Clinton Animal Shelter, gosh, probably 4 or 5 years ago. And so at the time, he was a pretty old dog. He was 10 or 11 years old. And his owner surrendered him to the shelter. And because he was such an old dog, many of the shelters in the area didn't want to take him, because being a larger dog, that was older, it was going to be harder to adopt him out. But the animal shelter in Clinton did a really great job of getting the word out for Buddy, and we had recently lost one of our other older male dogs, and went and met Buddy, and he did a great job with our puppies at the time, and he just melted our hearts. So Buddy came home to live with us. Buddy is some kind of lab, or at least a part lab. So he's a pretty big dog, but because he is getting old, he does have a harder time getting around and moving around. So, we're having to work out stuff with that. And of course, with our dogs being outside, they're going to wander around a little bit. So I think the next dog that we'll check out is Duke. Duke, come here. So Duke is a dog that kind of arrived in our lives. One of the teachers at Ridgeview, Miss Dillon, actually had some neighbors that left very quickly, and actually left Duke the dog, or who became Duke the dog, at their house. So he had been hanging out there at the house, abandoned, for quite some time. And so she knew how Steve and I were with animals, and asked if we wanted to get Duke. So again, we're not really exactly sure what Duke is. He has some pretty interesting characteristics. He's a pretty big dog. He probably weighs, I don't know, around 90 pounds. He's got these pointed ears. Something else that's really interesting about Duke is that he has double dew claws. So here on his back paw, he actually has what we call dew claws, which are extra claws out of the side, and he has double dew claws. So they don't really serve much a purpose for him at all, but it's just something that's genetic that some dogs have. So you can look up and see what kind of dogs have double dew claws. But he's a pretty good dog. He is, gosh, probably 9 or 10 years old at this point. But again, he's another dog that needed a home, and so we were able to give him one. And gosh, it looks like, hey, would you guys call the other two? Or the other? So the dogs have been hanging out around in the house quite a bit since we've been home. Usually during the day, and when we're not at home, the dogs all stay outside. They're primarily outside dogs, but when we are home, like we have been home a lot now, they get to come in the house and they take their naps, which leaves them in a really good position to bark all night long at the coyotes and anything that they hear out in the field, because that's just what they do out in the country. So let's go check out the other 2 dogs. So you can see the 2 smaller white dogs as we get a little bit closer that are coming with Ethan. These 2 dogs, their names are Yadi and Bear. And they're actually some litter mates. and they're another pair of dogs that came to us from the Clinton Animal Shelter. So back probably 7 years ago, there were a bunch of dogs that were dumped, unfortunately, out by the golf course out south of Clinton. And luckily, some teenage boys were out driving around and actually saw them being dumped. So they were able to go out and to grab them up and rescue them. And the dogs that were dumped ranged in age from full-grown dogs to puppies that were under a year old, puppies that were around 3 to 4 months old, and then some pretty small ones. And the animal shelter put out an alert that these dogs were going to need homes. Madeline, it's fine, that these dogs are going to need some homes. And again, we were kind of in the market at that time. It just hit it right about right that we wanted to have another dog to add to our family. And I knew when we went to go check out these dogs that we would probably come home with more than one. I think Steve was a little bit shocked when we came home with 2. But Yadi and Bear at the time were between 4 months and 6 months old whenever we got them. We're not exactly sure how old they were, and again, we're not exactly sure of the breed. We just know based on what they look like. So we have Yadi. Yadi has the bigger spots on his back. Yadi has a bit more of an attitude. He likes to think that he's the big man on campus. And then we have Bear over here. Bear just spends all of his time sleeping and hanging out. And they're actually named Yadi and Bear because Yadier Molina, who is the catcher for the Cardinals, is the kid's very favorite Cardinals player, or one of the favorite Cardinals players. And so we named them Yadi and Bear because Yadi Bear kind of sounds like Yadier put together. All right, so let's see, are we talking about Evie next?
Yeah.
Evie, come here. Evie. All right, so Madeline is gonna, yes, go ahead, buddy. Madeline is gonna talk about Evie as she comes up. Evie, hi, sweet girl. Evie is our only, I think Evie knows that she's on camera because she's super excited. Evie is our only female dog. All of the other dogs that we have are males. And also, as a side note, all of our animals that we have at our house, whether they're cats or dogs or goats, all of these animals that we have are fixed. So we make sure that we're doing our part to control the pet population. All right, so Madeline, tell us about Evie.
So this is Evie. She is a golden retriever.
No, try yellow lab.
Yellow lab?
Yep.
Okay. Didn't know that. And she's our only girl. She's really sweet. She gets really energetic whenever you call her name. Yeah, the story of how we got her was at our school. She randomly just showed up during our recess, and I came home to tell my dad, and I said, "Dad, there was a dog at school today."
Ethan, it's okay.
And my dad was like, "Really? Are you kidding me?" And I was like, they get very playful. And so my dad,
Go ahead and stand up, Madeline.
my dad drove over to school, picked her up, and brought her home. And so we've had her here ever since.
Yeah, so what Madeline doesn't really know is that when Evie was found over at Shawnee's school, they just couldn't believe that a sweet little lab like that didn't have a home. And this was 2 years ago, so she was still, pretty small puppy. So they had put out a lot of information on Facebook about a found dog and looking for her owner, trying to find her home, find where she belonged. And unfortunately, no one was able to take her home there at the school, so she was still hanging out at the school after the school day ended. So Steve and I talked, and we decided that we'd go over and, yes, that we would go over and find Evie and bring her home at least for the night, so that way she would have food and shelter over the night. And we put out the word through the Clinton area to see if anybody had lost her. Of course, everybody wanted her because she was so sweet and so cute, but she ended up staying at home with us. So the next dog that we're going to talk about is Bruce. And Bruce is this dog that Madeline is bringing up the road. Now, Bruce typically will stay in the house with us quite a bit because he really loves little Bucky the goat. Loves him, loves him, loves him. He's just not quite sure how to behave around Bucky, so we just want to make sure that Bucky stays safe and that Bruce doesn't get too excited. So, Madeline, you want to tell us about Bruce?
Yeah. Bruce is our youngest dog. Sit down.
No.
Sit. Oh, no.
Yeah, he's the youngest.
We got him about 2 years ago.
It'll be 2 years this summer.
And we named him Bruce because, well, we're
Bruce
really
Banner.
big Marvel fans. And Bruce Banner is the Hulk, and he was tiny when we got him. And Dad really wanted to name him Bruce because he was just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and Daddy thought that he would be a small puppy, but Daddy didn't quite know the trick of looking at the size of their paws when they were puppies. And Bruce had huge paws. And Bruce weighs close to 100 pounds now. We're not quite sure how big he is at this point. Bruce is also pretty cool because he actually has 2 different colored eyes, which is pretty neat. Bruce, come here.
So he has a brown eye and a blue eye. Most people ask if he's halfway blind, but he's not. It's just a special characteristic of a blue heeler dog. And we actually don't know all the breeds. So what we know is that he is a blue heeler.
Maybe. We don't really know.
And his parents definitely had a lot of mixes. And he also looks a lot like Bucky because he has like all the same kind of colors as Bucky.
Yep. All right. So the last dog that we're going to check out, Ethan's going to tell us about. And you can hear the dogs. They're like barking at each other and playing and running around.
Bruce and Evie are best friends.
Yeah, Bruce and Evie are best friends, so they like to play a lot and run around. They are not, they're not barking at each other and being mean because they're being dangerous. This is just their way to play with each other and to interact. And like I said, they've been inside most of the day today, so they have a lot of energy that they're trying to get out. All right, so the last dog that we're going to go check out is Ernie, and Ernie is a Great Pyrenees. So unlike the other dogs, Ernie actually stays pinned up in a special pen, and there's a couple of reasons why we keep him pinned up with the goats, and we'll see if Ethan can tell us a little bit about that, and if not, then I'll fill you in. So Great Pyrenees dogs are some really cool looking dogs. They are big dogs with long white hair that keeps them pretty well insulated during the cold months and during the hot summer months. All right, Ethan, what do you want to tell us about with Ernie?
So I'm wondering how we got Ernie.
Mm-hmm.
So when we got Ernie, me, Mom, and Dad were in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mom sat home because she's not big St. Louis. But Dad lives in St. Louis, so
Well, he's from St. Louis. Uh-huh.
and so when Mom got home, whenever she was doing whatever, Mindy started found Ernie on the road. So then she took Ernie to her house
Yeah.
and called the number, and they wouldn't answer. So then Mindy asked us to watch him and see if we can get his owner to come.
Mm-hmm.
And so his owner is our friend.
Shh.
And so me and Ernie, like, whenever we got home,
Shh.
Mom said, so they asked if we want to keep it.
Uh-huh.
Mom said yes.
Very good.
We got him, and whenever I went home, Mom said, "Hi, Ethan."
characteristics about a Great Pyrenees dog that kind of tie into the reason that we have him, number one, and the reason why we have him fenced in is Great Pyrenees are, Ethan, watch that fence. Great Pyrenees are really bred to be guard dogs. A lot of times you'll see them outside in the fields with sheep or with goats, and they're really good at keeping the animals around them protected. And they also like to wander. They can be pretty stubborn too. So the reason that we even found out about Ernie is because my parents have a lot of Great Pyrenees. They actually have 5 Pyrenees dogs that you've probably seen in some of the videos. And they tend to kind of wander up and down the road. So our neighbor thought that Ernie may have belonged to us. Well, turns out Ernie had made a little bit of a trek 3 miles from his owner's house. And when we were able to get a hold of the owners that were listed on his collar, they actually told us that they were looking for a new home for Ernie because he had been wandering quite a bit and had some issues with some of their livestock, with some of their ducks and chickens, I believe. And they asked us if we would be interested in keeping Ernie. And I love the breed of Great Pyrenees dogs, and so does my family, and so we decided to keep him. Now, Ernie has also shown himself to continue to be a wanderer. So we keep him locked up in this big area with the goats. Number one, because if we don't, then he ends up wandering about. He's ended up at our neighbor's house. It's like a mile away. We also keep him in here because he does a good job of hanging out with the goats and being protective of them. And so he's a good dog to have in here with the goats, and he's got plenty of room to run around, and he's got shelter in with the goats also. He's also one of our big guardian dogs. So even though he wasn't a dog that was abandoned or anything, he's still a dog that we were able to give a home to. So just like any animals, there are things that we do to take care of the dogs. Of course, we provide them with food, we provide them with water, and we also provide them with shelter. So when they're not inside the house, they've got places inside our garage where they can go in and be out of the elements. So these are our dogs. The kids are really excited to tell you about them. They've been asking when they'd be able to tell people about the dogs. Hopefully we just stay at 7 for a while and don't have any new ones that come our way. However, in this time whenever so many people are needing to be at home and people have a lot of extra time and love to give, if you are looking for an opportunity to add to your family, I would really encourage you to check out your local animal shelter. We have had such good luck with the Clinton Animal Shelter. That is a shelter that's closest to us, and they work really hard to make sure that the animals that you are looking at to adopt would be a good fit for your family. So I would encourage you, if you have extra love to give, really consider looking at your local shelter to see if there's somebody that could become a part of your life. And if you don't have a spot in your home to adopt an animal, a dog or a cat, I would also encourage you to think about donating to your local shelter. They do a lot to provide a good, safe, clean place for animals that are waiting for their forever home. So I would encourage you to check out what you can do to help them during this time. All right, so I'm glad that you could join us today to check out all of our animals and to see the kind of crazy world that we live in out here with all of our animals. I hope everybody has a great afternoon, and we'll see you next time.